From Barron, do you think there is a case to be made to remove lifetime tenure for SCOTUS and federal justices? It depends on what judges do. I am a textualist. Why? Because the point of the judiciary, in my view, is to act as a check and balance for legislative overreach and also ensuring originalist interpretation of law as it was written. The minute that you admit judicial activism, what you have basically done is you say that a justice now has the power, without being elected, without being accountable, and for the rest of their life, to, because they think it's moral and right, to change the U.S. Constitution or whatever judicial system you happen to have. There's no greater example of this than Plessy versus Ferguson. There was nothing in the Constitution that said separate but equal, but this doctrine was invented by racist justices at the Supreme Court. And it took, I think, 70 years, Brown v. Board of Education, for that to be undone. Judicial activism works in both directions. And you can have a small group of people basically change the entire fabric of society, and there's no oversight or accountability. It's very problematic. The other thing is that when you're a textualist, you don't really fear conservative justices. Why? Because they just don't change anything. It's inconvenient for you if you're progressive and you want rights, whether they be marriage equality or whatever it might be, but they don't really change things. They either regress you back to the Constitution as it was written, or they hold the status quo. They don't just go off on bizarre tangents and start changing things. Now, they might regress things you like certain rights and things like that were invented by the courts, but the point of the legislative process is that you have a mechanism to change your Constitution and pass new laws. It is not the place of the judiciary to pass new laws and invent new laws. It's such a moral hazard. You know, it used to not be controversial at all who was on the Supreme Court of the United States. And the greatest example of that, the tale of two justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalia. They were so far apart on judicial philosophy. One was the conservative, one was the liberal. They were as far apart as you can. Do you want to guess what the confirmations were for them? Bader Ginsburg was 97-3. Scalia was 98-0. Despite the fact that they were radicals in their political philosophy and judicial philosophy, it was not controversial at all for their nominations and for ultimately their approvals. Now, because the Supreme Court has become an instrument of social change, and it's viewed as the thing that will fix the correct bad problems of the Constitution and evolve society in some progressive direction, what we've seen is it's become hyper-controversial. Every justice is now 50-50 or 52-48 or something like that. And if one side doesn't get its way, it wants to impeach the justices or pack the court. This was not what the court was meant to do, and it's become a politicized simulacrum of its former glory. And that's a goddamn shame. So no, I don't think there should be a case to remove the lifetime tenure of the SCOTUS. I think if we're not going to use the SCOTUS correctly, we might as well just get rid of it and get rid of the entire judiciary and create a tricameral house instead of a bicameral house and have a Congress, a Senate, and a super Senate. And just go ahead and appoint some super senators and just have them make legislation and overrule the Constitution and so forth. There is no difference between the legislative body and the judicial body if this is the position that people are going to take. It cuts both directions. It causes nothing but harm. And I'm sorry, 9 unelected people appointed by a president at a particular period of time are not the most qualified people in the world to decide what my constitutional rights are and invent new rights out of thin air. There's a way to change the Constitution, either through a convention or through the constitutional amendment process. Follow that way. There's a way to create federal laws. We create thousands of them every single year in the federal government. Go do that. We live in an imperfect society, of course. That's why we have protests. That's why we have riots. That's why we have a legislative process, why we have elections. And if they don't work, change the way the elections work. I just did a whole speech about that. But don't go crying to a co-opted body and say, because we didn't get our way through the presidency and the legislative branch, we now want you to destroy the legitimacy of the court and demonize an entire branch of people who are supposed to be there to keep checks and balances and have them invent new rights. It makes no sense at all to me. And this is where I agree with Scalia absolutely.